Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I am Ruth Schmulowitz-Breutman. My parents, Francis Kaluzinski Schmulowitz and Harry Schmulowitz, known to each other as Fella and Hamel, were Holocaust survivors. They spent the entire length of World War II in Nazi-occupied Poland. In 1939, they had a child, siblings, parents, a home, and a business. In 1945, everything was gone, and they only had each other. I wanted to talk to you today to keep their memory alive and the memory of the 6 million that perished during these years. Many of the survivors are now gone, so it is up to my generation and successive ones to keep the stories alive. You will see that my information is vague in places and does not always follow chronologically. My parents did not talk a lot about their war experiences, and I tried to fit their story and the story of their hometown together. My brother Jeffrey and I visited Radomsko in March of 2000, which helped fill in some of the gaps. There is also a book called Children of Dust in Heaven, which was written by Stefania Heilbrunn. She was also a survivor, and she went to Israel and wrote this memoir just about their town. As I said, Radomsko was my parents' hometown. It was a shtetl, like hundreds of others that dotted the map of Poland. It sits on a railway line, halfway between Krakow and Warsaw. Half of the population of 30,000 was Jewish. So there were 15,000 Jewish people living in Radomsko in 1939. They lived with their Polish neighbors, sometimes in peace, sometimes in truce, rarely in friendship, but mostly the Jews were tolerated. Radomsko, these are some pictures that Jeffrey and I took. Radomsko was famous for its quality-made furniture. The craft was passed through the generations. My father was a skilled cabinet maker. At 5:30 in the morning on the 1st of September in 1939, German aircraft flew in and circled Radomsko. The Stuttgarts dropped their bombs and flew away. By noon, the streets were filled with people streaming east, trying to get away. People on foot, carrying bundles and leading their livestock, were trying to flee. In the morning, the planes were back. Those on the roads were shot with machine guns. This article appeared in the New York Daily News and described what happened that night, and the town of Radomsko was mentioned in the article. By September 3rd, a new order was established. All arms had to be surrendered. A curfew was imposed, and all the Jewish shops and businesses had to be closed until further notice. Owners were given 15 minutes to get out and take a handful of possessions. Tuesday, September 12th, the bottom picture, was known as Bloody Tuesday. From early morning, the Gestapo went from house to house, chasing the men out. They were beaten, kicked, and shot. The men were forced to lie in the mud, face down, while people stood by, jeering and laughing. This is a picture of Bloody Tuesday. The building in the other picture is the same building that's in the background, and that's the picture that we took in 2000. By November, a council of elders, known as the Judenrat, was formed as a liaison between the Jewish population and the German authorities. The Judenrat was totally ineffective because they could not foresee the extent and nature of the catastrophe threatening them, and it was beyond the comprehension of the normal mind. The next step in the misery of Radomsko was in December of 1939, when the ghetto was formed. The entire population was forced into the boundaries of a few streets. They were allowed to take only hand luggage and what they could carry. Those who tried to take a few sticks of furniture were robbed of everything. The first winter was terrible. Night after night, the ghetto was robbed and people were begging in the streets for the first time in their lives. Finally, the inevitable happened. A typhus epidemic erupted. By 1941, the ghetto's size was reduced and it was bursting at the seams. In 1942, the deportations began. The first action took a whole week. The people at that point suspected that death was inevitable. The Gestapo rushed in and ordered everyone into a large field. Thousands streamed in, smeared with blood, wounded, and kicked. The streets were strewn with already dead bodies. These markers are the only evidence that is left. Those who were still alive were herded into trains headed for Treblinka. They were taken across the country, not to Auschwitz, which was about 50 miles away. This diabolical plan was designed to keep escapees away from their towns. Exempted from the roundup were members of the Judenrat, doctors, dentists, 40 policemen and their wives, and a group of carpenters and builders. These workers were spared for the use the Germans still had for them. By 1942, 321 Jews of the 15,000 were left in Radomsko. Except for the few that were hidden, the entire population had been deported. Treblinka was a crematorium, and no one survived. A second auction happened later in the year, and those who remained were taken to a labor camp in Pianki. Radomsko was now Judenrein. Rein means literally clean. Radomsko was Jew-free. My parents were married in 1938. They had one happy year before September 1939. The night that the bombs flew over Radomsko, my mother gave birth to a baby girl. Her name was Tali, and she lived for about 2 years. That's Tali. I hope her name will be read here tonight. I believe she probably died during the typhus epidemic, when there was no medicine for her. My mother never talked about her until my daughter was born, and she told me that she had to be named with a T because I had a sister. On Bloody Tuesday, my father was in his factory. There was a hole in the floor. That's a picture of the hole. And he hid my mother there because he was spared, because he was a carpenter. There are many things I don't know here and have tried to figure out. My mother at this point saw her 3 brothers being shot and pushed into a ditch. That is all she ever said about that. Their home was inside the ghetto, so they did not have to move, but had to endure the worst of conditions. They lost everyone in both families during the deportation to Treblinka. As I said, my father was a cabinet maker, and he was selected to build furniture for the Germans. His challenge was to find a way to hide my mother. One of his workers prior to the war, took her in and hid her for almost 3 years. She lived in a cellar with 3 or 4 other people. There was a Polish mandate at that time that said anyone harboring a Jew was subject to death along with their entire family. These righteous people risked their lives and took her in. My mother will tell you this part of the story herself. At some point, my father was taken and sent to a labor camp. He was eventually brought to a barn and was at the end of a firing line. He said to the man next to him, "We are going to die one way or the other." They both ran through the barn, through the field, and to the fence, with the Nazi guards in pursuit. The other man was shot and killed, but my father made it out. What he did or where he went is not clear, but he found his way back to my mother, where she was hidden, and knocked on the window in the middle of the night. She did not know if he was dead or alive. They were close to liberation at this point, and he remained with her. My mother is going to tell you some parts of her own story. My daughter Tammy came to Florida, and we recorded her speaking. She was 87 at the time. She only barely touches on her feelings and says little about the agony that she endured. She does not talk a lot about her family's death. Her voice comes through clearly. It is the voice of a woman who lived courageously, suffered unbearably, and made peace with her tragedies. I'm going to let you listen to her, what she's going to tell you.
In 1939, I was sitting at dinner at the table, and the first bomb hit the house, and the chandelier fell on the place, and we got no place to go. Everything was broken down, and we went to a basement.
Who was with you?
Who was with me? Daddy. No, Daddy was not. I was there in Yaja, in court. And we were sitting there in that basement for 4 days with no food, with nothing. We can't get nobody.
Was it in the basement of your house?
In my house.
In the basement of the house?
My house. Nobody can help us because nobody knows that we're there.
So where was Grandpa?
Grandpa was outside. They took outsiders, the men, to do work.
Because he was a carpenter.
A carpenter, and they put him to work.
So what happened after the 4 days?
The 4 days, they came to the building, the gendarmerie. They took out the people who got left over there. My mother, my father, my brother, 3 brothers. I was separate from them. He trusted that man. He brought that letter. He said, I'm staying by the fence. Where the fence was. You come at night to this fence. Sure, I went through.
Was Yaja there with you there too?
Raja was separate. She went away right away. She didn't leave. And he said, you come with me. I said, I'm going with you. Where are you taking me? You go into the girl. This girl where she was working by you. Then, still we came to this girl. The guy who brought me the letter made a place for me in the woods. I can remember that I went through this. I want to repeat it. I was 5 days in the woods, alone with all the animals and all the trees.
In the woods?
In the woods. Because the guy got no place to put me.
So he got you through the fence and he got you to escape?
Yeah.
So you were in the woods by yourself?
By myself, 5 days.
What did you do for food?
I went at night to dig berries. Where I got from there, I don't know where I got, where people spit out. And I can imagine that a person can go through this. He said, Stasha, Hela, yes, to pay someplace in the woods, and she wants to come out from there. I said, she started to cry, how am I going to get it? I live in one room, and I have a little boy with me. Yeah. Where am I going to put it? And she got a little thing from the house, not the house, from the
From the outside, from the
No,
porch?
the inside, the mieszkanie, because now got the Polish
Okay,
from the, you know,
like a separate room down
a
below.
room, that's
room.
right.
Okay.
Was an entrance to go in to the roof. Then I was sitting there in the house. I got food. At night I went out for a sleeping guitar.
So you were staying during the day in the room under?
Yeah, she went to work. I was underneath. This was a whole year.
Did you know where your parents were anymore at this
My
time?
parents went right away. Then I went out, I went to all of the wagon.
They all went into the wagon, they were all taken right away?
Right away. Everybody took out everybody to the wagon. Then Adam went by us in the basement, and I was too. Now happened, Harry pushed me down to the day. That's just where I got saved.
So all of your family,
The whole
that was the last
family-
time you saw
Last
them?
The
time
last
you
time.
saw them was
That's
1939, you never
right.
saw them again?
Never.
And that was what, September 1939?
September 1939.
That's right.
Mother,
Mother, your father, and three
father,
brothers.
Everybody.
How many brothers?
3 brothers,
Yeah.
and 2 sisters.
Two
and the
sisters?
third one, yeah.
Mother, father, 3 brothers, and 2 sisters,
Sisters.
all
All
disappeared that
one,
day?
one
One day.
day.
What about,
They went in the same wagon
they were on the
to
same
the
wagon?
oven,
To Treblinka.
to Treblinka. Yeah, I can
What-
talk. Give me a little water. After this sitting over there, I heard Stasha said to me, "It's not end to this war. What's going to do, fella?" I said, "Stasha." No, I'm just, you know.
Yeah,
It's all right, it's okay.
It's okay.
Take your time.
Yeah.
We'll talk
We got
slow.
time.
We got plenty of time.
Yeah.
You can go back and forth.
We got a whole stack, we got a whole stack of tapes. We're set.
You can talk all day.
She said to me, "What are we going to do?" I said, "What I have to do? I have no home. I have no husband. I don't know where my husband is. My family, I know they went to Treblinka, all of them.
So did you know at that time that your family, because they went to Treblinka, that
I
they,
heard it what the people was talking. I was sitting in the basement. I heard everything.
You heard that they were killing the people, killing the Jews?
Everything I heard.
so,
So you knew they were all gone?
Mm-hmm.
Stasha was not Jewish.
No. Stasha was a Polish woman.
Polish woman, a little boy.
Okay. And then,
That little boy knows I'm dead. And when somebody came in the house, he was afraid, I'm going to sneeze or I'm going to cough. So he was standing, the little boy, 7 years old, and dancing on the door where I was behind.
to make noise, to
make
drown
noise.
Not to hear the noise,
Oh,
but she always got company, you know. Then he make that noise and not to hear him. At night, she pulled me out, Stasha said, "Come out and sit with us a little bit." And she covered the windows.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting, and I said, "Stasha, I'm going to sleep."
Didn't they have to cover the windows then because of the war anyway? Were they at that point?
That was covered a
Wasn't
lot.
there?
Yeah. It was covered a lot.
Like the
But
air
she-
raid restrictions or something?
Yeah. And she covered them. Then, what was the last?
So you were still with Stasha for that.
Stasha to the last minute.
And then they brought Yadja there, right?
Yeah,
That's, I remember that.
I
part.
remember.
You know what, go ahead.
Did you know that Grandpa was still somewhere, or did you not know?
No, that time I didn't know nothing.
You didn't know he was still alive?
That he was not there. I don't know where they took him to him to a lager at some place. I think Auschwitz or Buchenwald.
He was in a work camp. I don't
In a
remember
work
which
camp.
one. He was in a
Yeah,
work camp.
work
But he
camp.
ran away from there. He ran away from
He
there.
ran away. Oh, this was the tragedy.
He ran away with a
He
partner.
ran away from the concentration camp. And he came to me. And the window from the basement got a little window.
Because he knew you were with Stasha.
Yeah, he put me there. Then he ran away from the concentration camp. You can imagine. And he came at night. And he knocked on the window. Fella, het moord. Ik ben dat man. I'm your husband. I'm Hamburg, Shmulevich. Even the tear. I started to cry, and I woke up Stasha. And I said, oh, Stasha, what are we doing? It's my husband. She said, leave me alone. The animals were knocking every day, and you're dreaming from this.
So she didn't believe it.
She couldn't believe it. And he stays in a cold, in a wind, and he doesn't go away. Then Stasha went to sleep. She went, and I went upstairs from this, and I opened the door and I let him in. Ruth, I can tell you, I went through. I can't tell you.
So you let him into the house?
I let him in the house and went down right in the basement.
So then he was hiding down there with
He was
you.
hiding down there too.
Ruth, one night, at night, a couple, I don't know how when, I went out from that hall. I can sleep no more. I was standing in the room, and I saw a tank passing by through the window with a Russian flag. I started to scream, Stasha, I saw a Russian flag. She said, what about us? I
went
got
crazy.
I have to take you to the hospital. Like this.
Like you're losing your mind?
I
have
lost my mind.
Right.
And she gets me the coat and packs me up, come to the hospital. I said, Stasha, I saw a tank. Hela, co ty gadasz? Ty jesteś zwariowana teraz. Ty nie wiesz, co ty mówisz. You know?
You're imagining it.
Yeah, I have imagination. Then, after I was talking to her, I saw another thing going. Stasha, look, another tank. She said, where are the tanks? I didn't see it. What are you talking? Come to the hospital. I said, I'm not going. I saw a tank. What kind of tank? I saw a red flag, a Russian flag. This I remember from. Did you see the red flag? And I'm holding a hand, I'm making the hand blue. Blue, I didn't see that blue, I would hold her hand because I ran out. I saw a Russian thing. She locked the door, you're not going no place. Then I see the toy tank. Oh, now I'm not giving up. I said, Stasha, you come. And I took off my stockings, I don't know, and I went on the table. I worked up at the table, staying high to see the tank. And I worked on the table, and they won't shut me then when I went on the table. They said, oh, I can't tell you the tragedy. And I was so stubborn and strong. I said, I'm not going, I'm staying right here. Then we see one tank after the other, and I took the door and I said, Stasha, the Russian are here. She didn't know what to do. And I opened the door and I ran out. I ran out right to the road.
She ran out the door, and that was their liberation soon thereafter. My parents attempted to go back to their home in Radomsko, but they were brutalized by their Polish neighbors and had to flee in the middle of the night with the clothes on their backs. They went to Germany and spent 5 years there. That's where I was born. And then they came to America, where Jeffrey was born. And they lived in Florida and in the Bronx until my father's death in 1993 at age 86, and my mother's death in 2012 at age 97. The survivors of Radomsko came to America and to Israel. The survivors count as their biggest blessing the new generation. And I quote, "We have been lucky in our children. To see them after the unspeakable darkness we have been through makes us feel very grateful. We are very lucky, and we've been very lucky." Thank you. Thank you for listening. Jeffrey said it to me And it's true, my mother would have been so happy to see you all here today. She loved company, and she loved being with people. That was her greatest joy, is to be with people. So she thanks you, and I thank you for her, for being here and listening tonight. Thank you.